Hey everyone, and welcome back to your Linux and open source news show. This week we have some good news about Nvidia. They're finally focusing on Linux with contributing to an open source driver, but also trying to implement more stuff that are standards that everyone agrees upon to try and help the Linux desktop as a whole, which is good. We also have the EU, unfortunately, looking like they're gonna cave in to big tech companies by hugely simplifying all the protections that people in the EU have, which means privacy is gonna take a big hit if these proposals are adopted. And we also have plenty of stuff on Linux distros, desktop environments, web browsers, and Linux gaming. And we also have this message from our sponsor. This video is sponsored by SquareSpace. They are your all-in-one platform to create, publish, and manage your own website. They have really super easy tools to create your online presence, whether you know how to code or not. So they have what they call their blueprint system, which lets you pick from a variety of templates that are pre-built and will suit any type of website, whether you're looking for a simple blog, an online store, a video platform, whatever. All these templates are also optimized to give you solid SEO, and they even have a bunch of SEO tools that you need to make sure that your website doesn't end up in the last page of Google search results. On top of that, to go further, Squarespace has their own design engine to create your own pages. You can just drag and drop elements where you want them, and you can change the colors, the fonts, and just tweak the template however you want, or you can automate all of this. And once you have something you like, you can add extra features like creating your own online shop with a payment system that handles credit cards, PayPal, Apple Pay, and more. You can even design your own logo from Squarespace and book your own domain name. So check out squarespace.com/the Linux experiment, or just click the link in the description and you'll get 10% off your first website or domain purchase. Okay, so let's begin with Nvidia. They started contributing to the Nova open source driver that Red Hat started a while back. Through Timur Tabi, one of their engineers, they've sent 11 patches that add Turing support for that Nova driver, which adds to the already existing Ampere support. Of course, it uses the GSP firmware that all recent Nvidia cards rely upon, and that contains most of the actual code to run these cards. The driver generally just calls to code that is inside that GSP firmware. Now, these patches let Turing GPUs boot and start accessing that GSP firmware, although of course it is early days and it requires the latest Linux firmware from Git, but at least it means that GeForce 16 and 20 series should be supported with Nova alongside series 30, 40, and 50, which is really nice. Now, this driver is far from ready. I think we are a few years away from having that as the default instead of Nouveau, but it is still very good to see Nvidia actually contributing to it and making it better. Maybe it opens a future where most people can just use Nova and NVK on Linux, and people who really need professional support or commercial support or a supported official driver can use the Nvidia one instead. It would be wonderful, and I think it is a really good sign to see Nvidia finally opening up to Linux and not trying to do their stuff in their own corner of the world. Still on Nvidia, they gave a presentation at XDC, the developer conference, where they talked about fragmentation in the Direct Rendering Manager subsystem on Linux, also called DRM, not to be confused with digital rights management, the absolute cancer that is polluting every single format of file. No, this is the system that displays stuff on screen on Linux. Nvidia argued for more unification on that front. As an example, there are 57 DRM drivers in the kernel that support frame buffer device emulation. That's an API relying on a compatibility layer to display stuff on screen. But for example, only 14 drivers support the new blue screen of death feature that the Linux kernel offers. The issue is those two features and APIs should rely on the exact same mechanisms to draw stuff on screen, but each seems to be re-implementing ways of doing the exact same thing, meaning it's extra work for developers to actually support that feature set. Nvidia is thus arguing for more unification so calls can be reused between, for example, FBdev emulation and the DRM kernel panic feature as well, instead of duplicating stuff in both. They also pointed to various issues in Wayland screencasting support in the compositors and the applications, like the fact that a GUI interaction is needed to choose what you want to share, which prevents automation. Clients also aren't able to request a specific screen or window to screencast automatically. Sessions are not necessarily restorable, and the lack of pre-permissions is also an issue. It would let users say, always allow screencasting for app X on screen Y or for window Z. Of course, this is technical underlying stuff, but they do have a point. If the goal is to draw something on screen, it probably should be done in one single way. Now, I find it kind of funny that Nvidia is now the one arguing for more unification when for a long while they completely ignored the standards set by other people and tried to build their own version of it, which obviously nobody adopted, and then they ended up moving to the right standard, especially for their Wayland support, for example. As per Wayland screencasting, they're right, there are plenty of little issues like that. For example, me, I use OBS, I have 3 scenes, 2 of which use a screen share, and I get asked every single time I reopen OBS which window or screen I want to screencast, and that's super boring to do. It's quick, not a big problem, but it is annoying and I wish it could remember preferences. I'm not sure if it's an OBS thing or a Wayland thing, but it needs to be fixed. And to conclude on our Nvidia segment, this is about NVK, so not from Nvidia this time. It's the Vulkan driver that is being created by Collabora, mostly by Faith Extrend. And there's a lot of work happening on that driver as well. For example, they added Vulkan 1.4 features. They also worked on Cooperative Matrix, which is an AI and machine learning extension for Vulkan. And mostly they've been working on improving the driver's performance, working on adding real latency, better scheduling, better memory access, and image compression. But some of these changes will require modifications to Nouveau, which, according to Faith, is barely keeping the lights on right now, meaning this driver is just not seeing a lot of attention and a lot of work because resources are just too limited in the numbers of developers that can dedicate time to Nouveau. Still, they shared a graph, and it seems like in the games that they tested, NVK reached about 50% of the performance of the proprietary driver. I would assume that's NVK plus Nouveau. Although with image compression enabled, some games went much higher than that. Tested games include Subnautica, Age of Empires 4, Atomic Heart, Deep Rock Galactic, or XCOM 2. Now the next steps for this NVK driver will be finishing up Vulkan video support for good hardware-accelerated video decoding, fixing Zinc bugs as well to make sure that OpenGL support is good while using NVK as the driver, and of course there's also improving performance to catch up with the official Nvidia drivers. This is absolutely fantastic to see. If that driver relying on that old Nouveau driver can give 50% of the official driver performance, that's good. If with image compression it sometimes reaches 70 or 80%, then that's really, really good as well. And I would expect that when Nova hits the Linux kernel and becomes the default driver or becomes actually usable, this performance will shoot up as well, because Nouveau has to deal with a lot of legacy stuff and older Nvidia GPUs, where Nova can just focus on the newer ones. It's amazing work, and I cannot wait to be rid of that official Nvidia driver and just use stuff that is in Mesa, in the kernel. It's gonna be great. Now the EU is preparing something they call the Digital Omnibus, which has some good implications and some very, very bad ones. The good implication is maybe the end of cookie banners, because, of course, there are some new rules coming, most notably allowing users to set their cookie preference once at the browser level. So you could set in your browser settings, always refuse non-essential cookies. And when you visit a website, they query this preference, they get told, no, you can't have non-essential cookies, and then you don't even see a banner. Websites have to follow that preference or face sanctions. That's fantastic. The problem is, initially, this will not be the case. The rules will just be simplified, so cookie banners will change to a yes or no option, which is obviously worse for general privacy than the current system, because while the current solution of those convoluted banners full of dark patterns really suck, it still lets you configure what you don't want to be collected or stored. And the new solution doesn't give you that at all until that browser preference is implemented. But the main problem is, this digital omnibus has been widely criticized for being a big privacy regression and basically just deregulation. The main point of contention would be letting any AI actor train on personal user data if it is justified, but this leaves a lot of leeway to companies to try and find a justification, and this means that AI actors that already collected personal data and trained on that will not have to start from scratch or revise their model at all. This is already a big problem, because when you start including personal data in AI models, you open the door to mass surveillance and profiling. So it absolutely is a way to strip people of privacy. Also, a lot of the protections that were added on top of the GDPR framework are going to be moved into that GDPR framework, which is a lot more flexible. It leaves company a lot of leeway, it provides a lot of exceptions for company to take advantage of, to say yes, but we really do need this information and we do need to keep it for longer because it is for legitimate interest. It is in exchange of people accessing the website. It is for managing their preferences. And so you're gonna see a lot less privacy online if this is passed. Fortunately, it is just a proposal. It can still be refused. Most privacy enthusiasts and privacy-focused organizations are really emphasizing that this is a huge step back for privacy in the EU. This is being passed as something that will help EU companies and startups be more competitive, compete on the general world stage, but obviously this will also benefit all the giant big tech companies which have the means to collect all of that, to defend the choices that they make, arguing that yes, they did collect that for good reason, and so this is virtually just a big fat gift to Microsoft, Apple, Meta, Amazon, and the likes. It absolutely sucks. Hopefully it gets voted down. Now let's move on to more fun stuff. First, there's a new prototype to better handle online accounts in KDE. Right now, if you look at online accounts on Plasma, Nextcloud, OwnCloud, Google, and Open Desktop are your only options. The issue is most of these things do not permeate to the entire desktop and applications. Only Dolphin uses the Nextcloud and OwnCloud integrations. The Google account isn't used at all, apart from one application that lets you upload videos to YouTube directly. Google even blocks access to Google Drive through Dolphin, for example. So basically, even if you set up one of these accounts, none of your emails, contacts, calendars, notes, to-dos, whatever, will be synced with any app on KDE, which absolutely sucks. There's also no Mastodon account, no Matrix support, and plenty of other accounts could also be added. Basically, this thing is not very useful right now, and also it doesn't even work properly with sandboxed apps. So there's a new prototype that works with a daemon and with dbus, apps needing to be granted access to each specific account to be able to access their data, similar to what portals do on our modern desktops. The daemon handles the login flow from the account's database to the application, and right now this prototype handles Nextcloud, which is now integrated in KDE's PIM software, so Kmail, Calendar, Contacts, and the like. It also handles Mastodon, which integrates for now with Tocodon, the Mastodon client for KDE. And it also handles Google accounts, which is also handled by KDE's personal information management apps, so Contact, Calendar, etc., and Kmail, meaning if you set up that account, you actually get the information of that account in the applications that should use that. It is a much better way of doing things. Hopefully it gets more useful and gets more account types as time goes on. This is a big ease of use feature. Most people do rely on a digital ecosystem, whether it's their own through Nextcloud or their companies with Exchange or Microsoft accounts, or whether it is Google, and integrating that in just one simple login in your settings and then having all the apps that you want access that stuff if you let them. That's just way more useful than having to retype all that information in every single app that you want to use that might want access to your emails, contacts, calendar, and more. And it's also not really a problem on Linux because you know those apps are open source, you know the code is auditable, and if these things did something really weird with your account data, probably people would know. Now, it looks like Zorin OS 18 was a major hit, reporting 1 million downloads in a single month, which is pretty huge. It was just 100,000 downloads in the first 48 hours, so things have moved extremely fast for the distribution. Now, this might include many people frustrated with Windows 10's end of life and also the fact that Windows 11 is a frankly horrible operating system, but it could also include people who ran Zorin OS 17 because there is no real upgrade path yet. They started testing it experimentally, but apparently it is extremely broken and should not be used yet. So I guess many users just downloaded the new ISO and reinstalled over the previous system. This upgrade path will definitely be sorted out at some point, but if you really don't want to reinstall that, you'll have to be patient. And on another note, I wish more distributions shared their download numbers. They do have them. When you download something off the website, you can you can increment an anonymous tracker to know how many people downloaded from each mirror. You can have the same thing for a torrent. The only thing that's harder to track is in-place upgrades, because you would have to track the download count of maybe one specific package that is included in the upgrade, and you have to assure people that you're not collecting any personal data, including any IP address. That's a bit more difficult, but having at least the download numbers of an ISO would be a huge help. Right now, all we have to measure popularity is DistroWatch, and this is completely not representative because it's just based on vibes and hype and how many people talk about a specific distro, not actually how many people use it. Now, another week, another Mozilla-related blunder. They're developing an API to let AI developers automate web navigation through their AI tool. This is called Tabs, and what it offers is a way for companies developing chatbots or large language models to let those models take over browsing, like clicking, scrolling, searching on the web page, filling forms, submitting those forms, and all of that jazz. Basically giving the AI all the info about a page to let the AI navigate that page and then get feedback on what the web page is doing after the AI implemented a few actions. It's basically agentic web browsing. The free tier of this API will give developers about 1,000 requests per month, which is going to work for personal stuff or some testing, and then judging from the website, it's going to be $5 per 1,000 requests, although I would be surprised if there wasn't a discounted plan if you have a lot more requests or if you need a lot more requests. Other potential features will include reduced latency to access the API and also CAPTCHA solving, which is a nightmare, defeating the very purpose of a CAPTCHA made to identify humans over bots and block bots from doing stuff. If you can defeat that, that sucks. The API is already competing with Google's, with OpenAI's, and other AI developers' similar stuff, although Mozilla says that the scraped data taken from the web page to navigate it isn't kept by Mozilla. But it is absolutely going to be kept by the large language model or the AI chatbot that accesses it, because what the API gives that LLM is a version of the web page in JSON, ordered and structured, so it's, or other formats than JSON, but JSON seems to be the major one, and so obviously they're just going to keep that data and just develop a parser and store that and train on that. So that privacy stuff doesn't exist at all when it comes to those cloud-based AI models. The tagline of building a better web from Mozilla has just never been so far away. They keep doing the same stuff. They build stuff that already exists. They think they can compete with big tech companies, but they arrive months or years late. They don't provide a differentiated service or product. They don't try to improve upon it. They don't try to provide the same service in a different way that would be more privacy focused. They just keep blundering in the exact same direction, and it is insanely frustrating. Now, the founder of Mastodon, Eugen Rochko, is stepping down as the CEO of Mastodon and transferring all assets and trademarks to the non-profit that runs the thing. He says he doesn't want to end up like so many other community leaders where the founder's ego ends up making things worse, ends up making decisions that go against the community. He says there's been no risk of that, but also he doesn't want that to happen ever. He also says that running such a platform is a very stressful activity and that he just does not have the right personality for it. He says he's been compared with tech billionaires, even though he doesn't make that kind of cash, not even remotely, or some articles comparing him to Jeff Bezos. All that kind of community and news scrutiny apparently slowly wore him down. Eugen says he's proud of where Mastodon landed and that he'll be sticking around in an advisory role. Mastodon will also apparently set up a new non-profit in Belgium, because apparently they lost that non-profit status in Germany. There's already a new executive director, and the team stays in place to keep working on Mastodon. It looks like they also got some solid funding, around 2.5 million euros in total, from Jeff Atwood, who's the founder of Stack Exchange, from Biz Stone, who's one of Twitter's co-founders, from the founder of Craigslist, from AltStore, an alternative EU-based app store, and also from the global Chinese community of Universal Digital Commons, which is a funding organism that I couldn't find much about because their website is in Chinese and the translation is just illegible. Hopefully, with that kind of money, Mastodon can keep growing and stay open, decentralized, and private. I will personally admit I don't use it all that much anymore. I already have to deal with all the YouTube comments on this channel, on my Warhammer channel, and that's more than enough community interaction for me, thank you very much. I do post the videos I have on Mastodon, and I never had a bad experience there, not that often, but generally I found that social media has a really bad impact on my own personal mental health, so I just dialed it way back, and I think it helped a lot. Now let's conclude this episode on some gaming news. First, Valve updated their Steam runtime for Linux to version 4, and it is a big one. This thing is there to make sure games can run on Linux properly, independently of the distribution that you actually use. This runtime is now based on Debian 13 libraries instead of Debian 11, which means a lot of stuff is now much more recent in there, like libflag, OpenSSL, the SDL, and more. Plenty of libraries that were also 32 and 64-bit compatible are now 64-bit only, because of course Debian 13 dropped 32-bit as a general install target, and so a lot of these libraries just are no longer available in 32-bit version from Debian. But I think it's a good move. It could be in preparation of moving Steam to be fully 64-bit, because it's basically one of the last holdouts for distros to transition away from the entire 32-bit architecture. Hopefully this can happen soon so we can stop dedicating resources to maintaining an architecture that is not really that useful anymore. But also, it's nice to have all of those updated libraries, because if you want to build a game for Linux or you want to test it on Linux through Proton, having access to those more modern libraries is probably better. And we also got a pretty big update for VKD3D Proton, the compatibility layer that translates DirectX 12 to Vulkan for Linux gaming. Version 3 is now released and it supports FSR 4, and it rewrites the entire shader backend, which will add support for the DirectX 12 version of a lot of games that were completely broken when you tried to run them in DirectX 12 mode, like Red Dead Redemption 2 for example. Support for that Microsoft API also was improved by mapping various features to Vulkan extensions, and there are nice performance improvements for Halo Infinite, for The Last of Us Part 1 and 2, for Death Stranding, for Helldivers 2, for Starfield, Satisfactory, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and a lot more. It's very nice to see even more work on all those compatibility layers and tools ahead of the launch of the Steam machine and the Steam frame. When these release, they might attract a lot more people, and to have an experience that is as good as possible and have people stick with this and find Linux as a very suitable gaming platform, we need those tools to be perfect or as close to perfect as can be. So if we can make sure that all the games that at least don't require anti-cheat can run almost perfectly, then that's good, and then we'll be able to take a look at that anti-cheat stuff once people have bought into the Steam machine and actually want to play some competitive games that require anti-cheat. Maybe developers at that point will realize they really should let people play. And if the Steam machine doesn't interest you, but you would like a new computer, then check out our sponsor, Tuxedo Computer. Tuxedo is the only brand of computers that I rely upon these days. They make laptops and desktops that ship with Linux pre-installed. So when you buy one, you know that Linux is just going to run really, really well on those devices. And they have a huge amount of choice for laptops, desktops, whether you want something small, form factor and affordable, all the way up to a gaming laptop, a workstation, a big tower. They have everything with plenty of hardware choices, plenty of customization options, keyboard layouts, everything you want. I only use their stuff. I'm really, really happy with it. They've been sponsoring the channel for something like 3 years now. They're just fantastic, and as always, the link is down in the description. Okay, so this will conclude today's video. Let me remind you to use all those YouTube buttons since the channel got a content warning for a super old video. Views have been dropping off a cliff because YouTube is basically shadow banning channels that got a content warning. So do click those buttons, do leave some comments. You know how it works and why it's important. You also find plenty of links in the description to support the channel if you want to do so, with some nice benefits attached to that. So thank you all for watching or listening, and I guess you'll see me in the next one. Bye!